Hey scholars, welcome back to another e-lesson video, another essay enrichment lesson, this one over organizing a Q2 rhetorical analysis. So on the Q2 essay, your intro and conclusion paragraphs are going to be the same for every text that you analyze. That introduction is going to establish the rhetorical situation of the passage and establish your thesis. The conclusion will need to recap your analysis and conclude with commentary on the effectiveness of the essay's rhetoric. The body paragraphs, though, present you with some options. And you must pick a specific element of the rhetorical strategies that you're organizing to organize those body paragraphs around. So, what element should I organize my essay around? When choosing what to organize your body paragraphs around, you have three choices. You can organize around techniques or devices. You can organize them around the intended effects on the audience. Or you can organize them around the rhetorical constraints the writer faces. So let's take a look at an example of how you might organize an essay around techniques or devices. Each body paragraph in this case would focus on a specific persuasive technique, a specific rhetorical figure, or a specific stylistic device. And here's what a thesis statement might look like for such an essay. In his letter, Banneker employs anamnesis, allusions, syllogistic reasoning, and a polite tone to persuade Jefferson to soften his heart toward slavery in America. And my outline would look something like this. In the first body paragraph, I'd talk about his use of anamnesis. The second body paragraph, I'd talk about Banneker's allusions. Third body paragraph would talk about the big syllogism that he makes, connecting Jefferson and his beliefs on the Declaration of Independence to his beliefs toward slavery. And then finally, the polite tone that he maintains, the various elements of word choice he uses to maintain that polite tone. So you can see here that each of my body paragraphs is focused on examining the use of a particular technique or device. Let's take a look now at how an essay might be organized around the intended effects of various rhetorical strategies on the audience. This is where each body paragraph focuses on a different way the writer is trying to persuade the audience. So here's a thesis statement for that kind of essay. In her speech, Kelly attempts to inspire her audience to help dismantle the child labor system in the U.S. by first enlightening them to the severity of the issue, and then by logically and morally obliging them to act. Here, our outline might look something like this. In the first body paragraph, I'd talk about the different ways in which the writer tries to enlighten the audience to the issue. Then I would talk about how the different ways that the writer tries to logically oblige the audience to act. And finally, the different ways the writer tries to morally oblige the audience to act. So again, this is an example of how I've organized the body paragraphs around the different intended effects on the audience. Lastly, let's take a look at what an essay would look like that's organized around rhetorical constraints. This is where each body paragraph focuses on a different rhetorical constraint. Those constraints, of course, being the various elements of the rhetorical situation that the author must address. So here's an example of a thesis statement using that organizational pattern. In his speech, Kennedy attempts to turn public opinion against the steel company's price hike. But to do so, he must overcome his audience's apathy toward and misperceptions about the price hike, as well as avoid the political dangers of appearing socialist. And the outline would look something like this. In the first body paragraph, I talk about the different ways Kennedy overcomes the audience's apathy. In the second body paragraph, talk about different ways that Kennedy overcomes the audience's misconceptions about what these steel companies are doing. And then the final body paragraph, I talk about the different ways that Kennedy, appeals to ethos or whatever to appear to not be socialist. So, is one organizational method better than the others? Well, not really. You can write effective Q2 essays using any of those three organizational patterns. However, looking back at average scores, there are some notable trends that I've observed. Those students who tend to organize Q2 essays purely around devices and techniques, their scores tend to be lower. Whereas students who organize essays around effects on the audience, those scores are markedly better. And those essays that are organized around rhetorical constraints have the highest scores by far. The organization itself is not what's affecting the scores here. A well-organized essay is a well-organized essay no matter how you do it. If analyzed well, the essay will score well. However, the method that you choose can impact the quality of your analysis, albeit indirectly. So here's what I mean. Here's our example of an essay organized around techniques and devices. And because it's organized, each body paragraph focuses on a single device or technique, I can only discuss the effects of that one technique or device within the paragraph, which is kind of limiting. I can't talk about, for instance, how multiple devices are used to achieve the same effect. Or it's not impossible, but doing so becomes very difficult when I use this organizational pattern. Also, when students work this way, they often forget to tie their analysis back to the rhetorical situation because it's not part of what they're focused on. When, however, you organize around the intended effects on the audience, you have a few more options. First of all, because you're discussing effects, it opens you up to discuss multiple techniques and how those different techniques and devices are working toward achieving the same effect. So in itself, this organizational pattern just naturally allows for a greater complexity of your discussion. However, it still doesn't address the fact that when students do it this way, they often forget to tie their discussion back to the rhetorical situation. To address that, really the best way to go, in my mind, is to organize around the rhetorical constraints. Here, I can still discuss multiple devices and techniques and how they're each used to address those constraints. I can also discuss multiple intended effects on the audience because there's different ways that the writer is trying to address those constraints. And so this allows for even greater complexity of my discussion. And also, I can't forget to tie back into the situation because the whole paragraph is about a rhetorical constraint, which is a product of the rhetorical situation. In the end, organizing your essay around rhetorical constraints, while I think it's the best way to go, does not automatically mean your essay will be successful. Just like organizing using the other ways does not mean your essay will be poor. But organizing around constraints does force you to acknowledge the rhetorical situation in every body paragraph. And doing that makes your analysis more effective. All right, scholars, that's all for this video. Thank you again for all of your hard work. Make sure that you contact me if you have any questions, and I'll see you when I see you.